Hello, everybody. Shooty here. This is, I think, take 4 or 5 of this video. Um, Quick recap of the other takes that I can remember. First take, I talked for 40 minutes, and it turned out the microphone was muted the whole time, so that's like leaving the lens cap on. Oh no, that was my last. You know what? I don't even remember anymore. I don't care. I'm gonna just not tell you about the different takes I've gone through. Um, Actually, I will talk about my last take. My last take wasn't that bad, but it was like I only can get the story stuff in, and I don't know if I really want to do like a three-parter on this, to be frank, because every time I jump back on and play this game, I forget to record more gameplay. So uh, it's kind of hard for me to get gameplay to put in the background, and if I'm going to do multiple videos, I'm going to need more than just 1 hour's worth of gameplay to show, because I'm not that lazy, guys, come on. I mean, I know my videos are kind of dog shit, but I'm not, like, so lazy I'm going to reuse the same gameplay in more than one video, except for that one time I recycled control content in a video that was talking about something completely different than control. So yeah. And I'm also starting to yawn immediately after starting the mic. Okay, so Baldur's Gate 3. I'll start where I start with all my videos with the story. So story-wise, this game is really good. I'm not gonna get too deep into the story itself because it's actually kind of hard to talk about the story in this game because it has a lot of like branching narrative elements to it, and um, there's also a tiny bit of an RNG element to the storytelling if you don't save scum, like me. So it's kind of hard to like exactly talk about the main narrative of the game beyond the bare bones. There is a plot to basically of these, or I guess the bare bones would be your character wakes up with a uh, I almost called it a gene stealer. This is not Warhammer 40,000. It wakes up with a mind flayer parasite in his head, in their head is what I should say, that will turn your character as well as a party of characters that join you into mind. Every time I go to record, I start to yawn. I get tired, sleepy all of a sudden. And so basically, the entire plot centers around you trying to find a cure for your parasite. Um, there's a couple of twists and turns and stuff like that. There's even stuff in the main plot for longtime fans of the Baldur's Gate franchise. Uh, but as a whole, the game is primarily focused on the, um, I would say more about like you and how you basically navigate the story. So, um, and characters I would say are a big important building block to the actual narrative in this game. Because the overarching narrative in this game is a cancer syndrome type of plot, essentially. Uh, and anybody who may not be initiated, cancer syndrome is a something I've coined for describing a narrative particularly in a video game, but you can get it in movies too, regarding a character getting some kind of ailment that will kill them unless if they get a cure to the ailment. So Cyberpunk 2077, uh, Baldur's Gate 3. If I look at my shelf, maybe I'll find another example that jumps out at me. Far Cry 2, I think, has a little bit of that. Your character gets malaria. Um, Although the plot doesn't really revolve around curing the malaria, I think that's like a more of a side thing. Elysium, I think, counts. That movie Elysium. I never actually watched it. I just know from the trailers the main character gets like super cancer AIDS from standing inside a machine, so he's trying to break into like a stereotypical the elites live in a ivory tower place where but they have the cure for what he needs up there. So that's like the general over plot though of Baldur's Gate 3 is you have cancer syndrome and you need to cure it. Um, and it's not just you got to cast the characters with you, all of which will lie to you. Every single one of your companions are lying fuckers who will not tell you the truth. You have to like essentially make them open up to you by like doing actions that they like. And is if you're like being a goody two shoes, this is actually generally not that hard of a thing to do. In fact, I would wager that it is likely a difficult thing to get the characters in this game to not like you. Um, at least from the times I've played, most of the actions you take in this game, like they do the thing where it's like, oh, this character liked that and that character didn't like that, and in fact, sometimes you'll choose something and one character will like an action, but then another character won't like the action. But I feel like the game is designed in such a way that these like disliking actions have to really compound on top of each other to a point where the character's like, okay, no, fuck you. Um, so Baldur's Gate 3 definitely has a um, lot of like character to it, like not just like in the story, but like in the actual like characters. Um, you get everything from like a stereotypical mustache twirling villain to your, I would almost say Marvel-esque type stuff, but borderline Marvel-esque. It doesn't go full beans on the Marvel writing, which thank God. If this game was like full beans like Marvel, where your characters just kept making like witty quips every 5 seconds, I would have likely uninstalled the game as fast as possible. But no, they don't quite get that far. Um, and I found pretty much all the companions to be relatively likable. I don't think I disliked any of the companions too much. Even Asterion, who's like his character and stereotype and all that, um, annoy me a lot in other games. But in this game, like he's like written and just a and, and what I mean like stereotype is he's like spoiler, Asterian's a vampire. Um, he's like stereotypical like what's the word I'm looking for? Posh type vampire. It's like, oh yes, I do enjoy drinking the blood, or it's sort of like that. He's not, he doesn't ever say something like that, but he's like got a very like strong character type to him, and I would hate that in other games, but in this game I actually didn't mind it that much because he's a layered character. He's complicated, and while he's actually probably one of the few companions who's okay with the protagonist being a evil character, he's also a character you could sway into being a good guy. So he's not actually like hardcore evil or anything like that. You can persuade him into thinking other ways. So there's nuance. Uh, let's see. There's Will, who he's kind of like this. I think a way I would describe him is he's Faust meets Aragon. Is the I think the best way I can describe him. He's a character who is this like sort of like stoic hero type, but he's a hero because he made the deal with the devil, like literally. So his characters basically his conflicts mainly revolve around him being in debt to a devil. Um, and again, like I said, it doesn't like they pace the stories out just right to where the characters don't overstay their welcome. Um, There's Karlach, who is a tiefling who is not a devil, and to be frank, I don't know the difference between the tiefling and the devil. D&D nerds will probably explain to me in the comment section the difference between a tiefling and a devil. But frankly, they look like devils to me. They literally are the red-skinned people with horns and a devil tail. They kind of seem like devils to me, guys. But she's a not devil who has a heart that will kill her unless if you can get some upgrades for her. Like I said, she's a likable character. She's probably one of the few characters I enjoy the most. There was one moment that kind of bothered me with her when, this might sound like stupid of me to say or cold-hearted, but she starts crying at one point, and I felt like it was out of character for her. Like, she was more of like a character I imagine when she gets upset, she gets angry, not a character who cries when she gets upset. Um, and that isn't to say that her crying wasn't reasonable. It's just it didn't feel in character for me. But I digress. She's a good character. Um, there's Jaheira, who's like a carryover from the first two Baldur's Gate games. She's not bad. And I frankly, her character kind of, to me, mainly acts more like as an anchor to the previous two games than it does as an actual like explorable um companion. Although there is like meat to her and her companion story, so it's not like there's nothing there. Um, she and I think Haskell, he's the druid who can turn into a bear that you can have sex with in the game. Those two, these two are kind of frankly my least favorite companions in the whole game, though, because both. So Haskell, his story mainly takes place entirely in the second act, and once it's done, there's not much that develops with him after that. After that, he's just kind of there. Um, Jaheira, you don't get to recruit her until. In fact, I should be clear. You don't even get to recruit Haskell. I know I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I know someone's gonna correct me. I don't care. These are fantasy fictional names, and I may or may not be partially illiterate. So I don't care. I'm going to mispronounce these names. So Haskell, you don't actually get to recruit him as a companion until the end of his story arc in the second act, and so it's like he's kind of like not there until the end of the game. Not the end of the game, but like the second or third act, whatever. And same sort of thing with Jaheira. Like you don't get to actually have her as a companion until the third act, and that's when you get most of her character plot stuff. So they're kind of my like those two are my like least favorite companions. Um, you get to spend more time with the other companions. Shadowheart, she's a decent character, mainly in that she's kind of got this like conflict of choosing between her her Shar worship or her family, which I'm not 100% privy on Baldur's Gate lore beyond the fact that there's usually at least one companion you could recruit that's a Shar worshipper, and Shar worship is generally frowned upon. Um, uh, I don't feel like they actually completely explain the Shar cult thing all that well, so it's kind of hard for me to get a tenuous grasp on it. Um, but what is there is like for Shadowheart in particular, it's kind of neat and interesting. Um, and basically you're based. I think she's also one of the characters who kind of like she's okay with the protagonist being good or evil also. But you can kind of flip her to be one or the other. And she's also gonna be basically always in your party. Like Shadowheart is gonna be your healer, and there's no reason not to have a healer in your party at all times. That I'm just hard pressed to say that hey, yeah, maybe you should leave Shadowheart in camp this time because when you have a character who literally is that utilitarianly important, maybe if you're playing a cleric, like if you decide to do a cleric playthrough, then she's a character that might be more optional. Um, but as it stands within the realms of any other kind of playthrough, though, she's just gonna always be in your party. Um, what's that name? That Gith Yankee, the tiny nose lady, uh, Lazelle. Uh, she, her, and the entire Gith Yankee race feel like they fell out of Warhammer. Like it could be Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer 40K. It actually really doesn't matter which one. Uh, and if anybody doesn't understand what I'm trying to say by that, Warhammer is like the flavor of those universes, both the fantasy and the sci-fi version, are basically like, okay, it's like you think of Star Trek, right? You think about this thoughtful, um, optimistic, and insightful science fiction show and all that. And then you think in that Warhammer 40K is like literally the opposite of that. It's described as grimdark, where everybody just hates each other and there's always war and conflict. And sort of the same thing applies to the fantasy stuff. Although ironically, I don't think like the whole all races hate each other thing is as heavy in Warhammer Fantasy. I think that actually some of the races are actually prone to like each other a tiny bit on some certain levels in the fantasy Warhammer Fantasy. But the Gith Yankee, they would if you wrote them into Warhammer, they would fit right in because their entire race is like extremely like, oh, we're superior, oh, destroy the weak, oh, might makes right. They literally like have like a nest or a creche, and they got in the nest or the creche, excuse me, is like they went into a monastery and killed a bunch of monks, and like that's their new home, and it's like that fits it right in with like something from Warhammer. So that's Lazelle's whole character is she's kind of like this might makes right type of character. She's also probably the one female companion who is the easiest to romance, probably because she like right in the first act she like as long as you're like demonstrating characteristics of being like a strong leader, from what I can tell anyway, it makes her more interested in you. Um, let's see, Gale the Snail. Gale the Snail. Really, really good, potent wizard character who, and he's like, I'm gonna make the Aragon reference again, but this is more like in looks. He kind of like reminds me like in looks what Aragon kind of would be if he was in the video game. But he's like a sophisticated, intellectual wizard, basically. But and it's weird, he's got like a really low charismatic stat, but the way he talks is like he's extremely charismatic, which makes him likable. But it's kind of funny because it's like his actual personality, despite being charismatic, has no effect on his charismatic stats. It's just kind of funny to think about. Like, normally, if you're thinking about like this character's not charismatic, it's like Lazelle. She's not charismatic, and her personality is also just not charismatic. So it makes sense. But then Gale comes along, and he's likable, but he's got low charisma. And it's like, okay, I guess you're not all that impressive, Gale. I guess you're not uh, Barack Obama giving a speech charismatic or something like that. So, um, it's just kind of a funny little thing. Um, yeah, and I think I've described all those companions. Asterion. Yep, 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 yep. Okay, yeah. So I've described all the companions. All the characters are really good. They're all likable. They're all memorable. And you can tell because I can actually remember their names. Usually, I can't remember names to save my life. This is a true story. I've worked with a man before for about 6 months, and I never learned his name. and literally every time I approached him, I called him by a different name. Um, so uh, basically, that's like high mark from, especially from me. If I'm able to remember the characters' names, that means they're pretty well written. It's kind of hard for me like point at a character and say, oh, this character's actually kind of bad. And besides the companions, there's like Lord Gortash, who's kind of like this, like, uh, someone described him as Elon Musk, and that's sort of works because he makes like robots that protect the city, so it kind of works a tiny bit. But yeah, he's like a decent mustache twirling villain. They're all kind of mustache twirling villain types. Uh, what the hell is his name? The Catrick Thorn, who's more of like the uh, withered old general type of villain. There's I think Ophelia was her name. I'm gonna call her Ophelia, but that's probably not how you pronounce her name. But she's like oh, I enjoy murder way too much, and I draw pictures of myself stabbing other kids in my classrooms in the back of my textbooks. She's that kind of like edgy type of character. Um, Not likable, but like you kind of like get into what her character is. Um, and then the real standout villain in this game is my boy Raphael. Raphael, he is the like delicious type of evil where he is smiling with every sentence he delivers. um and that's like to me like the best villain of all time. He is like he's a Disney villain. I don't like Disney, but he would make an excellent Disney villain. He's always smiling. He even like sings his own, like if you're fighting him in the boss fight, like which is completely optional, he's singing in it. So he's an excellent villain. Um Hands down got to be one of my most top favorite villains now of all time, period. He's up there with uh Voss from Far Cry and uh Makarov from Modern Warfare 2. So yeah, the uh, roster of characters in this game is really good. Everybody's like memorable. Um, Story is like well written with like lots of twists and stuff. Um, I think I'm partial to disliking the fact that your companions are always super closed mouth about shit, but at the same time, I understand what they were trying to do with it, which is that they wanted to basically, like, as the plot progresses and develops in certain ways, you learn more about the characters and companions you're with, so you like them more, and it mostly works. It just some of it feels it's like, um, I feel like for some of them, it would have been nice to have a couple of companions that are more open books, but everybody plays their cards close to the chest in your party. Um, Will's the Will's the only one where I would think he would actually be an open book in any other scenario. But the thing is he literally cannot tell you the details of his contract with the devil because he's like his contract I'm guessing like he's just magically forced not to talk about that stuff. So, and that's the only explanation I have. So, otherwise I feel like he would actually be an open book because most of the time you can approach him and talk to him about shit, and most of the time he's pretty honest, with the exception of the fact that he's the son of Duke Ravengard. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning after you spoil the story. Bro, I didn't know Luke was Darth Vader's son. Um, so, yeah, it's a really good story. Definitely gets a high mark from me. Gameplay wise, it is this game is a French kiss, not French kiss. Shit. Shit, motherfucker. It's a chef's kiss. It is a chef's kiss. Um, when it comes to gameplay, lots of interactivity in the world environment, and at first you may not completely understand how that is beneficial towards the game until you get into combat and realize you can do things in the not just like to your enemies but to the environment that can actually really be uh, crucial for how you play a game. A particular instance that I will cite is early on in the beginning of the game. There are some people where I presume they're hunting Karlach because they think she's a devil, and then if you let Karlach convince you otherwise, you go and find these people, and then it turns out that they were bad people and they attack you. Now, there's only 3 of these individuals, but one of them in particular is a heavy hitter. He could do like 3 attacks in one turn, and those attacks can literally like one shot some members of your party. So he's an extremely tough foe to fight, and then he's got 2 people backing him up on top of that. Now, I was having a particularly rough time with this fight. I tried to do that fight multiple different ways, and I kept dying. So eventually, what I did to basically win this fight was, before the fight started, there's like a mezzanine level above him, and there's 2 ladders that go up to this mezzanine. Now, what I did was I got my party up on top of the mezzanine, and then I destroyed the ladders before the fight started. And when the fight started, he still managed to get up there, because it turns out his stats were set up in such a way where he can jump up onto the mezzanine. But it was fine, because before he could even get one attack off, my party managed to whittle his health down to like 1/4 of what it was at the beginning of the fight. So when he got up there, he took out 2 of my characters in one turn, but that was okay because my other 2 characters could finish him off. And it turned out the other 2 enemies, they couldn't jump up to where we were, so we were able to take them out from up above and all that. So now that fight could have played out differently, and if I was actually good at this game, I probably wouldn't have needed to like destroy ladders and shit to make sure enemies couldn't reach me. But the option was there, and I was still able to overcome this fight. And to me, that's awesome, because it's not just this one example. There's lots of examples in this game where you can do that sort of stuff, where you can manipulate the environment. There was another fight I was in where there was this raised platform with like a wooden bridge linking like 2, like, we'll say like stone platforms, and like below the wooden bridge was a bottomless pit. And during the fight, a goblin ran onto the wooden platform, so I was gonna like just shoot a fire spell at the goblin, and then it turned out that the platform was could be damaged. Now, I could have shot my fireball at the goblin, but there was like a higher chance of me missing the goblin. So instead I shot the bridge, where there was a 100% chance I was gonna hit it, and it destroyed the bridge, and then the goblin fell into the bottomless pit. And I killed the goblin in one turn. I didn't have to worry about, oh no, I missed the goblin this turn, and I guess next turn he's gonna fuck me up some, because guess what? It didn't matter. I took out the platform beneath his feet. There's tons of opportunities in this game that let that kind of shit happen, and it's really awesome. I love that when that shit happens. It, Another quick example I'll give, because I don't want to do too many of these, is there was I had a part of the game spoiled for me, and it turned out this like Balthazar guy, he has a really tough boss fight. So I decided I want to kill him before I got to the boss fight. So I attacked him when he was in the chamber that he was in before the boss fight. And it turns out he's still tough to fight in that chamber. Okay, fair enough. I went around and I collected every barrel of fire powder I could possibly get my hands on, and I stacked it around this Balthazar guy, And then I shot a fireball in the room, and it worked way better than I was expecting. And it didn't just kill him; it killed everything in the room all in one shot. So later on, I didn't have to fight him during that really tough fight. Which in my book, that's a-okay, because I watched my brother do it, and it's frankly, uh, I just prefer the idea that I'm gonna kill Balthasar before I actually have to fight him. And really cool thing is this game, like, characters don't just have like a psychic ability where they just automatically know when a character is dead. It's actually designed in such a way that if you kill enemies, like, say, like, if you're in the goblin camp and you kill goblins in one room, the goblins in the next room won't necessarily know it happened. It's only if, like, the enemies have a chance to warn the others around them that the entire faction will become like an enemy to you. So you can actually, like, there's a lot of, like, opportunity to basically do subterfuge to enemies and stuff like that and take advantage of, like, blind spots and stuff. Um, I did see that there was one person on YouTube who actually managed to beat this game as a solo rogue. So there's a lot of, like, playability to this game where it's like there's tons of shit you can do to uh, basically take down your enemies. There isn't just the one single way, and that's really cool in my book. Those are frankly, my favorite types of games is when there's just so many opportunities for the player to do something. Um, let's see here. What I think a complaint I do sort of have in this game is when it is, well, for starters, there's two fights that are kind of crappy. Although I'll focus on one of them at a time. The first one is the fight with Urgal. So you're in a Shar temple that's been abandoned, and you run into this, like, dork named Urgal, and he's a really tough fight because of, one, how Urgal has like an invisibility, and secondly, the arena that you have to fight Urgal in. So when you go to fight Urgal, there's like a mezzanine area, and then you enter the arena below the mezzanine, and Urgal and all of his bros are, like, standing up there on top of the mezzanine. Now, the problem comes in is that Urgal's bros, his little minions, have weapons that have a dual purpose as both a ranged and a melee weapon. And what this allows them to do is to basically, it's like the beaches in Normandy. You can try to run all the way up on top of the mezzanine to fight them, but there's also this, like, I don't know what they're called, and D&D nerds can get mad at me for not knowing what it's called, but it's like a leopard with like uh squid tentacles on it, and it can teleport people around and stuff and make phantom copies of itself. So you can't just, like, run past that. You have to address that threat. And then on top of that, Urgal's also doing some bullshit, and he'll, like, turn invisible at the end of a turn, and then he becomes unvisible at the beginning of his next turn when he attacks you, and then he'll turn invisible again. So you can't, like, it's kind of hard to fight Urgal himself because he turns invisible, and it takes, unless if you have, like, detect invisibility spells, or if you do what I do, which is use an AoE attack, uh, to basically force him out of invisibility, it is really hard to fight Urgal. And then to top it all off, his little guys are up in, like, their pillbox, like, machine gunning you down with MG42s. Um, so that whole fight is really obnoxious to me, and that's also a fight where I basically do the fire powder trick, where I sneak in with, like, a character who's invisible. I drop some fire barrels, like, right behind Urgal and blow them up, and it kills him, and it doesn't alert his friends, and on top of that, I have the added benefit that he's dead. So, yay me. Um, the second one is also, ironically, in a Shar temple. It's in the third act, and you have to bring Shadowheart to this, like, Shar temple, and the fight's just kind of like really crappy because there's so many fucking enemies in this arena, and at least 4 of them are spellcasters, and spellcasters are like integral parts to any combat scenario. They can make or break an entire combat situation. So you have like 4 of them gunning against you in this fight. It's a really nasty fight. I beat it by cheesing the fight, but to be clear, I have witnessed it personally that you do not have to cheese this fight to win it. But it doesn't feel like a good fight in my opinion. I feel like there could be some tweaks to that particular fight that make it feel less like I'm basically walking into a slaughterhouse. That being said, uh, it's not 100% a bullshit fight because I have witnessed somebody beat the fight. Granted, they only had one party member left at the end of the fight, so take that as you may. Uh, uh, and although the game mostly plays well, I have a hard time like trying to say that this. I got a friend who dislikes this game strongly. In fact, he prefers Larian Studios' previous game, Divinity Original Sin, over this game. And while I respect his opinion, I do think he's wrong. uh, um, it's hard to like quantify, but this game is like you really gotta like think outside the box to get your way through some of the combat situations in this game. You can't always just run up to an enemy and bash them with swords. Uh, sometimes you just gotta like do some goofy shit to uh, fuck them up. And I suppose it probably plays into the spirit of what D&D is. Um, it's like a game. It's not like Skyrim, where Skyrim you can bash your way through everything. D&D is kind of more of a game where it's designed around thinking and being imaginative with your combat situations. And on top of that, there's a randomness to it. Like, just because you swing your sword does not mean you will connect with your enemy. In fact, that's something that you see in some other games, like turn-based games. In fact, Larian Studios' previous game had that, where sometimes your attack just wouldn't land. Just would happen sometimes. Oh well. Um, I don't think I have much else to say about this game. I think it's really good, and I appreciate it. I hope Larian Studio makes a sequel to it. Not without getting into anything specific, I feel like they leave a lot open at the end of this game that allows them to build upon it with a sequel. So, um, really good. I hope there's a sequel. And that's it. That's all I've got to say. Uh, my next video will be on the removal of calluses from your toes. Take care, everybody.